Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Pagan Rants on Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, Episode 6 Exorcism in Greendale. My dear viewers, what a show I have for you, because this one is the biggest pile of piss I've ever had to watch. Oh, the displeasure. It starts off where Lilith naturally lies and uses half-truths in order to try and fabricate a story with Sabrina. So she tells her that she is a witch, which is naturally a lie, but does inform Sabrina about the magic scrying spell that she put on the mirrors in order to keep her safe. Lilith lies, though, that Edward had put her up to it when it was in fact the Dark Lord, and also lies about being his old student and acolyte. She fabricates an entire life about herself, where she says she's an excommunicate witch from the Coven of Shadows in New Hampshire, because she was engaged to be married but had the misfortune to fall in love with a mortal. Naturally, Sabrina, because she's not as stupid as one would want her to believe, is a little suspicious, and still asks questions about why in the hell she would have another protector when her father has already installed her aunts as her guardians. And that's why Miss Wardwell, as she knows her, would agree to such a task. And naturally, Lilith lies about the fact that she was in love with Edward Spellman. Sabrina's naturally furious and tells her that her obligation to the Spellman family is null and void, and proceeds to storm out of the house and vents to her cousin Ambrose. Ambrose also tells her to give her the benefit of the doubt. Now, this is where it starts to get interesting, because demonic apparitions start appearing to all of Sabrina's friends. And when I say the demonic apparition, I mean the demon that's lurking inside Uncle Jesse. And this demon apparition first goes to Harvey. He shames him about the fact that he's not as brave as one would like him to be, that his soul is fearful, that he is a coward, and that he will always be scared of the dark, essentially. It's a bit true, let's face facts, but hearing it from a demon and also hearing it out loud is none too pleasant. Next, the demonic apparition goes to Rosalind and tells her that the lack of faith that she has in God is the whole reason that she's going blind. Naturally, that's not true, but because of the fact that Ros also has that shame and low self-esteem about the fact she's going blind, she partially listens to it. Thirdly, the demon visits Susie. And Susie is, quite frankly, given the worst treatment of all. She's been called an abomination due to the fact she is a girl who looks like a boy and dresses like a boy. He takes a rather sadistic pleasure in using these words against Susie, much more than he does with the other two, if I might add. Well, that's the impression that I get. But hey, Susie then goes to visit her uncle out of fear, and when she notices that she's asleep, she gets rather confused, I imagine, and closes the door, but I think internally vows to herself never to go in there again. So Aunt Hilda goes in for the job interview at Dr. Cerberus's and naturally gets the job, because hey, who wants some nice bubbly person such as Aunt Hilda to go into the shop, be a good employee and stuff. I mean, yeah, and then we cut into Zelda checking on Lady Blackwood's babies, because she's now the official midwife to the High Priest and his wife. And Mr. Evil Pants is rather demanding with the whole thing. Is the baby okay? Is it healthy? Has it got a heartbeat? What sex is it? Blah, blah, blah. Zelda gets him out of the room, fortunately, and just proceeds to have a conversation with Lady Blackwood in private. Sabrina goes to school and gets informed by her friends about Uncle Harvey's strange behavior. to the point where Harvey actually suggests to get someone to do an exorcism on Uncle Jesse. Now, Sabrina plays it cool. She pretends like it's nothing. She even laughs at some point that it's a ridiculous notion and that it should not even be considered that it might be a demon because demons don't exist. But the other three are increasingly convinced due to the fact they all three of them had apparitions of Uncle Jesse coming to them, and they were certain it wasn't a nightmare, as Sabrina tried to dismiss it as. So Sabrina, who actually is worried about it, goes to tell her aunts about it, but they dismiss it too because of the fact that actual demonic possessions are a very rare occurrence, and thus are usually not actually demonic possessions, but cases of disease. Apparently, even witches, these satanic witches, like to go for the scientific method instead of the propaganda machine of the false god, as they call the Christian god. Now, what Sabrina does find out from Aunt Zelda is that it's possible that her friends are getting psychological attacks due to the fact that they had to touch the host of this demon in order to tie him up. And because they made physical contact with the host, they are now susceptible to these psychological attacks. And, Sabrina decides, okay, fine, I'm going to astral project to see this demon. She asks Ambrose for his help, but he declines and says, you're on your own with this one. And Sabrina goes to see the demon, and the demon continuously mocks her. He is furious at her friends for tying him up, and is inhabiting Jesse because of his sin. And Sabrina asks, what sort of sin has this man committed? And then the demon proceeds to call him a sodomite. And he reveals his name when she asks, because she reveals to him that she is a witch. He says his name is Merzikai. It's ridiculous. I don't even know how to pronounce it because it is that ridiculous. He gives her a false name, that's all I'm going to say. And then proceeds to try to attack her when she starts to verbally put up a fight. And when she comes back, after almost dying, because the demon tried to take possession of her astral projection, fortunately Ambrose saved her, she and Ambrose discover that actually this cheeky bastard, and I'm actually using a quote, has a fondness for wordplay because his name is not Miyarsakai at all, but it's actually an anagram of ice cream. And I'm sitting here thinking, really, ice cream? Ice cream? How does the demon even know what ice cream is? It's in hell, what do you expect? Then again, it must know about the flavor banana flavored ice cream, which is literally demonic, so that's not really much of a surprise. But Sabrina eventually manages to get her cunning hat on by manipulating, I hope, Harvey into coming with her to the mines to try to find the seal of this demon or wherever it came from. And they found it. They found a seal with a snake on it. And apparently, the reason why Jesse was called a sodomite was because of the fact he, as a child, put on his mother's clothes. He got beaten black and blue for it, apparently. And the demon continues to make these psychological attacks on Sabrina's friends, especially with Rosalind while she's actually at the opticians for her myopia. And she literally starts questioning her faith in front of her pastor father, which I think is quite brave of her. So it's actually kind of a touching scene. And eventually it's found out that this demon is called Apophis, the devouring worm. And finally, fortunately for Sabrina, because she's now allowed into proper witchy classes, in demonology class she starts asking questions about exorcisms and demonic possessions. And according to her teacher and the rest of the pupils, witches are not permitted to have or do exorcisms due to the fact it is a Catholic rite. But the problem is, tenacious demons, such as the devouring worm, absolutely are in need of exorcism. So, unauthorized exorcisms would be an option. Now, Nick, in my opinion, gets even better in this episode because he asks her out, or, well, more subtly, but Sabrina reminds him that she has a boyfriend, and Nick cheekily says, well, I'm down for sharing, because she lives two lives, so why can't she date two guys? Quite frankly, I wouldn't know what to say about that, but I actually like his brazenness for it. It makes me wonder whether or not she should go for it, to be perfectly honest. Anyway, Miss Wardwell, aka Lilith, and her aunts try to convince her not to do it. Well, apparently her aunts are convinced with Lilith's story because it seems like the typical thing that their brother would do. And it turns out that Sabrina's father Edward had written down this exorcism specifically for this sort of moment. Now, whether or not he actually wrote it, because it's Lilith talking, it starts to get my clogs wearing a bit, so that sort of mystery, whether or not he actually wrote it or not, is quite interesting, but yeah, they end up doing it anyway. Well, Sabrina, Lilith, and Hilda anyway. Hilda's excommunicated, so she feels like she has nothing left to lose. And since the fact that the priests of the Catholic rite are calling upon God in order to help them, witches are permitted to do exorcism by the way that they are relying on the power of previous born witches and also their own power. So there is officially nothing against morals and power that to say that a witch cannot perform an exorcism at all. Now, they start to do this exorcism, and I'm going to take these names apart one by one, because this is the part that made me want to throw a chair out of the window. These are the witches' names that they call on. Lilith of Aradia. Okay, fair enough, she is one of the original witches that is mentioned in the Bible or in the series of stories. I think it was a Jewish text first. I think she was first mentioned in a Jewish text, so she's one of the original witches, I suppose. Morgana Le Fay, obviously, call upon Arthur's half-sister, call upon the Queen of Avalon herself, because why use someone else, because she's obvious. Black Annis. Now, Black Annis is a boogeyman figure in English folklore. She is imagined as a kind of blue-faced hag or witch with like iron claws or something and a taste for human flesh, which is, again, stereotypical, and apparently she has a penchant for children. Apparently her haunt is Leicestershire, in a cave called the Dane Hills, where this great oak tree stands at the entrance. Apparently she likes to haunt out for children, tearing them limb from limb. But she's also known to snatch people. Anyway, it's one of those typical, annoying, stereotypical witches that they decided to use. The next one really got me angry. Anne Boleyn, second wife of Henry VIII, mother to Elizabeth I, daughter of Sir Thomas Boleyn and Elizabeth Howard, eldest daughter of the clan. Now, well, that's what they say anyway. It's some say Mary is the eldest, some say Anne is the eldest. It's not really known, but she is sometimes said to be the eldest. The point is, they dared to use her as an example of a witch. Let me get this straight. Anne Boleyn was not a witch. She was not an adulteress. She was not someone who committed incest. Those were lies made up at the convenience and behest of Henry VIII to Sir Thomas Cromwell, who also, may I remind you, decided to get rid of his rivals and people who were in his way anyway. It was just convenient for both of them. The biggest liars are able to believe their own lies because it's convenient. Anne Boleyn was not a witch. The fact that she had a sixth fingernail does not insinuate witchcraft, and she certainly was not a Satanist. She was a Lutheran in mindset. But do you think that Henry VIII let her practice anything but the Catholic faith in appearance? No way. She was Protestant in thinking, but that was about it. Get this into your head. Or have you people been watching Rain? Piece of bollocks. No wonder people are turning dumb these days when it comes to Anne Boleyn and whether or not she actually is guilty or not guilty. Everybody knows that she's not guilty. It's literally written in historical fact. Literally history will tell you, the sources will tell you, she could not have possibly done anything, and she was certainly not a witch. Get this into your heads, all of you. Next they list the Witch of Endor. Naturally she would be used because she was one of the most powerful witches, for crying out loud. She summoned Samuel's spirit, for crying out loud. And the next two, I wanted to actually sacrifice. You know what? Since these guys enjoy demonizing witches, I'm just gonna say, I literally felt like sacrificing 2 humans at that point. I'm a pagan, I don't sacrifice, by the way, but this made me homicidal. They called on Hecate and Artemis. Hecate is the original goddess of witchcraft, necromancy, the night, and also was a deity of an Uranic nature. She is also the goddess of the sky, the sea, and the underworld. She is the only titaness with powers in all spheres. Oh my god, using Hecate's name in this, it gets me riled up. Hecate is not associated with satanic witches. She's associated with Wiccans. She's associated with pagans. Get this in your head. Good gods. And to use Artemis, for crying out loud. Artemis is the goddess of the moon. She's the goddess of virgins. She's the goddess of nature itself. She is the guardian of animals. She has nothing, and I repeat, nothing to do with satanic witchcraft. At most, pagans call on her for a blessing or at least protection of girls. That's about it. Because do you know why? That's Artemis's sphere of power. Unless, of course, you use one of her other nicknames, or at least her hybrid names, or whatever we call them these days. That's about it. Okay? Next, Luna. Okay, the moon. Fine. Hildegard of Bingen. Let me get this into your heads. Hildegard was not a witch, she was a prophetess of some note. She was a spirited woman who was able to write amazing liturgical dramas, and she wrote theology and botanical and medical texts. But no, because something is written by a woman and it's to do with botanism, it has to be witchcraft. For crying out loud, she's a saint. She's a freaking saint. It's literally, in fact, she was a German Benedictine abbess. She was a writer, a composer, a philosopher. Some say Christian mystic. She was a visionary. She was a polymath. She was specializing in natural history. But no, if a woman decides to think for herself, suddenly she's considered a witch. I think the only reason that she wasn't considered a witch by some people was because she was of a high noble family. And possibly because also the fact that she had visions and she was the 10th child. But let's not say anything about that. Do you know why she wasn't considered a witch? Why she will never be considered a witch? Because she's a saint. She's a Benedictine abbess. And besides, just because she was a seer, that doesn't mean she has witchcraft. She did not practice witchcraft. There is a difference between having a sixth sense, a gift, and witchcraft. There is a major difference. One is a power, another is a gift. A gift cannot be utilized with power. Oh my god, the people don't get this. Okay, Mary LaVue, next one. Okay, this is probably the longest rant that I've ever done, but hey, she was a voodoo conjurer. Marie Kathleen LaVue, I think her name was. She was born in the French Quarter of New Orleans in Louisiana. And she was a practitioner of root work, conjuration, and also Native American and African spiritualism, which is nowadays known as the New Orleans Voodoo. So I guess maybe she is worthy of calling upon, but once again, this is a series that says its witches are satanic. I think to associate any of these people with this series is an insult beyond belief. And I'm going to go through this next one next, because this also buoys my bubble. Because the next two witches that are being called upon are Tituba, who, by the way, was an African slave, who was accused by two children in the Salem witch trials, who was tortured into confessing that she was a witch, is actually invoked as a witch. I think these writers decided to call on Salem because, quite frankly, I don't see what sort of sane person would do this to that poor woman. It's as if one tiny word and suddenly you are completely and utterly demonized forever. I'm surprised that these nitwits did not decide to call upon Jacquetta, the Lady of Rivers. Do you know why? Because that woman was actually tried for witchcraft. That woman actually had witchcraft in her veins. She was descended from Melusina, for crying out loud. I'm surprised that they didn't even consider her. But no, it's probably lazy writing. They didn't actually look up whether or not these witches were actual witches or not. I think they just used a few famous names that shoot in their heads. And the last one, Mary Bradbury, she was accused, convicted, and was going to be hung. But do you know what? She escaped the noose. She actually escaped the noose. I'm surprised that these idiots didn't use every single one of those Salem witches. I think if you're going to also look at the Sorcerer's Apprentice, why didn't you just hail Abigail Williams while you were at it? Bloody idiots. And it gets worse. I'm telling you, it gets worse. Because the next three that she calls upon are the Celtic goddesses known as the Morrigan. Navanya, Buth, and Macha. If I hear another person pronounce Macha as Matcha, I'm going to punch you in the face. Quite frankly, I have no tolerance of this anymore. Navan, Buth, and Macha are the Morrigan. So the three most powerful warlike goddesses in the whole of the Levogavla Eran, or the taking of the Book of the Taking of Ireland, if you're going to translate it from the Old Irish. And they're probably three of the most powerful goddesses in the entire book. I mean, for crying out loud, Navanya has the capability of killing 100 men with a single battle cry. And it just pains me to see Celtic goddesses again in a series associated with satanic witchcraft. Then she calls on Circe. Again, I feel like shooting myself in the foot. Moldaya. Now, this one was, I think, added insult to injury, because this woman was actually accused of witchcraft. The townspeople attempted to murder her in her sleep by burning her house down, and then later she was found frozen solid inside a stone. This woman suffered a fate worse than anyone could ever imagine. And then she goes on and lists Juventus the Virgin. Right, Juventus the Virgin is actually an ancient Roman goddess of youth. and stability, I think it was. She's basically the Roman version of Hebe. And Hebe in Greek mythology is the daughter of Zeus and Hera and is probably the most pacifistic goddess you could ever meet in your entire life. So the fact that I'm seeing this name in front of me, I'm beyond boiling point right now. Juno, okay, go and put your head down a toilet or something. I really couldn't care less. Now, finally, we have an official witch, Sybil Leek. This person, as far as I could said, was quite famous in England for a while. She was an English witch. She was into the occult. She was an astrologer and a self-proclaimed psychic. Now, if you hear that, you're also like, heh, psychic. I bet she wasn't. No, I bet she wasn't either. But hey, I have a sixth sense myself. I am a Wiccan, so I'm not really one to judge, I'm afraid. Then, fortunately, Aunt Zelda arrives and calls on every single Spellman witch in the family. And then, lo and behold, Sabrina calls on the Kindly Ones. And those who don't know Greek mythology, the Kindly Ones are also known as the Furies. Alecto, Megaera, and Tisiphone. 3 goddesses of vengeance. Now, I think these are quite applicable, but once again, this is a series that thinks that witches are satanic, so please just don't mix up pagan with Satanism. I think someone doesn't understand that pagan is not synonymous with Satan. I mean, for crying out loud, it should be obvious, but apparently isn't. Then she calls on the Mother of Darkness, which is what I've heard a synonym for Persephone. Again, I felt like committing some very atrocious acts upon my own self, because this is just... it's insulting. It's so insulting, I can't even speak. Now, once the exorcism is done, this ugly worm that's Apophis comes out, and quite frankly, I had expected a snake of some sort, but no. Anyway, they sealed it back in and threw it down a well, or whatever. And eventually the Spellmans are threatened, more to the end of the episode, with excommunication by Mr. Judgmental High Priest, until of course Zelda reminds him that she is the midwife, and that his wife is actually pregnant with twins. And suddenly he's not so keen on getting rid of them all, because hey, his wife's twins are on the line, and Zelda's one of the best midwives in the coven. Now, I wouldn't say that this episode is the best one at all, but when it comes to Susie, I think it resonates, because Susie ends up wearing a dress, and Susie hasn't done that before. She's dressed as a girl. And it goes to show just how badly Apothesis' words had affected her, because she was actually willing to wear a dress at that point. There is also scenes where Hilda is spiking a coffee with love potion or something, some sort of love juice, and then of course there is also a conversation between Lilith and Sabrina at the end, where it turns out Lilith actually staged the whole thing, and that Uncle Jesse really wasn't dead, but she needed him to be. And something tells me she also had something to do with Apophis actually taking possession of him. That everything just went according to what the Dark Lord wanted and the Dark Lord hoped, and also what she hopes, and that Sabrina seems to be falling closer and closer into the Dark Lord's clutches. I have to admit, by the end of this episode, I really wasn't paying attention, due to the fact that I was just done with it. I was just done with the whole enchilada, especially after that insulting exorcism. And I have a lot of pent-up fury about it still, and I often don't know how to get rid of it. And it's going to be even more difficult, because this coming block I have a thesis statement to write, as well as 3 other projects, so I'm stressed out of my wits. But I'm going to leave it there. and I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like, subscribe if you wish, and leave a comment about, well, whatever. Do you agree? Do you disagree with some of my points? I would really like to know. So, my little ravens, this was Raven Rose. I'm gonna sign off now. My voice is starting to break. I hope you guys have a good day, or a good night, or a good afternoon, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!